So Matt Nagy gave up play calling in the build-up to the Bears-Vikings game. About time, most of you will probably say, because we've been watching a Bears team that have just disappeared on the offensive side. FantasyFootball.org has the Bears defense ranked as the 9th in the league, and I always hark back to the way they single-handedly dismantled Brady's Bucks to set the standard for the shutdown defense they aim to play game in, game out. Unfortunately, their offense just can't seem to take advantage of this. Incomplete passes, overthrowing receivers, and what appears to be a complete abandonment of the run game have the Bears now sitting 5-5 after a 3-0 start. With the defense doing all it possibly can to give them a chance, something needs to happen, and happen quick with Foles and co, or the Bears might be looking at another QB in next year's draft. So how do they fix this? To be completely honest with you, there's no straightforward answer, and there are some questions that can't even be answered. Tariq Cohen is done for the season, that's a huge loss. Anthony Miller seems to have a niggling knee injury, David Montgomery didn't suit up against the Vikings with a concussion. The O-line, however, can definitely improve. Per Pro Football Reference, Nick Foles has been sacked and hurried over 2.5 times a game each. He's been hit over 4.5 times a game, and he's been pressured over 10 times per game. In terms of ranking, the O-line are 21st, 12th, 31st and 24th in these stats. Foles also has an average pocket time of 2.2 seconds, which is joint worst in the league. He's not getting anywhere near the time or the space as other quarterbacks to study the defense, make his reads and throw the right pass. What's worse is that the offensive line is one of those structural changes in a team that GMs struggle to make during the season. This sounds pretty doom and gloom, but I did see some hope in the opening drive against the Vikings, and that's what I want to set as the benchmark to build on in my analysis. I saw Bill Lazor, the OC, architect a great drive here. Yes, it did end in a field goal and not a touchdown, but this is a Bears offense that will honestly take any points it can get right now, and if you start the game with some points, no matter how many, it sets a tone and does wonders for momentum going forward. Okay, full disclosure, it wasn't the Bears' first drive, it was actually their second. The first drive went a bit like this. A quick check down pass left to Darnell Mooney for no gain, and this was followed by an interception by Harrison Smith intended for Anthony Miller. At first it looks like this interception is more Miller's fault than Foles', but when you look at the back angle you're going to see Foles wildly misses his mark, and Miller getting a hand to it is probably the best he can do given the position he's in. But I'm feeling generous today, so I'm going to give the Bears some real credit on the next drive, the one we're looking at, which is technically their first real drive. They reset, regroup, and put the previous play behind them completely. They come back with a more focused plan of how to get the ball up the field, and they do a solid job. The first thing I want to do is just run through all the plays in this drive so you can see what happened, and then I'll go a little deeper into what I think makes this effective and what the offense can learn from this. So Minnesota have just scored a touchdown, and the ball is sitting at the Chicago 25-yard line after the touchback. The first play is an outside zone pitch to Cordarrelle Patterson around the right-hand side for a gain of 5 yards. 2nd and 5 is going to see Foles run the play action and get the ball out to Lamar Miller in the flats, who's going to get 7 yards. A new set of downs on the Chicago 37 is going to see Foles hit Allen Robinson almost immediately on the check down. 2nd and 3 will see a low snap, which Foles still manages to control. He rolls out to the right and hits Darnell Mooney, who's running a straight out for 3 yards. Back to 1st and 10 again. Foles is going to hit Allen Robinson, who's running an out for a 5-yard gain. 2nd and 5 is another run play. Cordarrelle Patterson takes this 5 yards to the left around the offensive line. And the next play is 1st and 10, and Foles is going to get some airtime on this, 24 yards to Allen Robinson, who's running the corner. The rest of the plays in this drive are going to comprise of a total of 2 rushes for a total of 5 yards, 1 9-yard completion, and 3 incomplete passes. So the drive to an extent falls apart after this point, but I want to look at why it worked until then. This is really Bill Lazor's first set of play calls this season, and I want to look at the keys to what worked and what the Bears can take from this to try and repair their offense. So key number 1, re-establish the run. I want to show you a quick table here. These are the rushing yards per game for the Bears running backs. Notice anything here? Let me add some columns to show you the record and the results of each of these games. The Bears appear to have completely abandoned the run game from week 3 onwards, and it's a telling factor in their results. Tariq Cohen got injured in week 3. That's a huge irreplaceable loss, but Cohen wasn't even taking the majority of the rushing snaps, and it still doesn't devalue how much this Bears team needs a solid run game in their offense. Cordarrelle Patterson has established himself this season as probably the best punt/kickoff returner in the league right now. The Bears should be desperate to get him more involved. You look at the rushing attempts per game as well, and you see that the run isn't even getting a chance here. I mean, to me, there's never been a clearer visualization of the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think there's also a case to mix the run up a little bit. In their first loss of the season against the Colts, I counted 13 out of their 15 rush attempts going through the line of scrimmage rather than sweeps, counters, outside zones that take the runners to the edges of the offensive and defensive line. Running through the middle is fine if you're productive, but these 13 rushes accounted for 32 yards. Another game, the loss to the Rams, saw 16 out of 18 runs through the line of scrimmage for a total of 51 yards, with 9 out of these 16 hitting the A-gap either side of the center. This is just far too predictable, and that's what they look to change up in the first drive against the Vikings. The first 2 runs in this drive are outside zones, which they get reasonable yardage from. Counters are a highly effective strategy. Take this one for example that the Bucs pulled off against the Panthers a couple of weeks ago. Counters throw off the defense because they cause the linebackers and safeties to get flat-footed. They motion one way and so does the defense before the running back heads back in the opposite direction, leaving the defense for dead. The Bears need to give the run game more opportunities, make it clear that you want to prioritize this along with the pass. If you can re-establish the run game, it already takes some of the pressure off Nick Foles because the running backs will continue to put him in better field position. So my second key, and this is I guess 2 points, simplify the passing game for Nick Foles and build up his confidence from the get-go. Take a look at some of these passes from the drive against Minnesota and you'll see how Foles is moving and looking during each play. The first 3 passes he attempts are completions and they're all short passes. We've got 2 passes going out to the flats, 1 to Allen Robinson on a screen and Cordero Patterson on a wheel. And then we've got another out route. These are all relatively easy throws, and they all appear to be either the first or second read for Foles. Screens and wheels are usually a go-to for getting a few easy yards, and I like what Bill Lazor was calling here, particularly due to its simplicity. Lazor's game plan going into the first drive is just to get the offense moving. In both senses, the aim here is to build confidence. He gets the run going by pushing them to the edges, and he gets Foles up and running with giving him some early straightforward completions. They reset after their actual first drive when Foles threw the interception. I think they realised trying to force a long pass down the field on the second throw of the game wasn't the best way to start because it's forcing a quarterback already down on confidence and performance to make a risky throw, one that he ultimately overthrows. Keep it simple. Get the quarterback rolling out to essentially negate the lack of time he has in the pocket and get some easy completions. And in almost a mini-game snapshot, we saw exactly what can happen during this very drive if you manage to get this mindset established. Foles' fourth throw is a 24-yard deep pass to Allen Robinson on an out route. This is a tough, deep throw, and I think it's made possible by the confidence that's been built up from the previous completions. Another thing that this opening drive does is that it creates space for the receivers. According to AWS Next Gen Stats, there are 4 Bears receivers with more than 28 targets. But their average separation, which is defined as the distance in yards between a wide receiver or tight end and the nearest defender at the time of catch or incompletion, is extremely low. The highest is Anthony Miller, and he features at number 65 out of 122 receivers. Foles is throwing into traffic far too frequently because his receivers aren't finding open space. This is what caused the interception earlier in the Vikings game, and it's what's caused dozens of incompletions earlier on in the season. Wheels and screens allow the receiver to get into space. It allows them to pick up pace and scan the field before they come near a defender. It gives them a chance to hit the right gaps and get good yards after carry, and obviously, as already mentioned, it gives the quarterback the confidence of another completion. I think sometimes we have to sit back and remember who Nick Foles is. Granted, since the Super Bowl he's not been the same quarterback, I realise that, but one of the trademarks of that Super Bowl was his ability and confidence in making big time throws in tight angles when needed. The 17 Eagles played with no fear, happy to throw into traffic on 3rd and 4th down. They basically decided that if they were going out, they were going out with a bang. So we know what Foles is capable of. We know he's capable of making these throws. He just needs to be set up to make them and reminded that he has that in his arsenal. That's where I see the direction the Bears offense needs to take. Is it that simple? Absolutely not. If it was, I'd be a head coach and not sitting at home making YouTube videos. But I appreciate this change in leadership when it comes to play calling. And just from one drive, I see that there's a change between what's been happening so far and how the Bears need to restructure their game plan to make sure they get some more out of this season. They had a great start to the season. They got to 3-0 and then squandered it, and now sit 5-5. While some changes can probably only be sorted out in the off-season, they have to push on with a different game plan if they want any chance of just scraping into that wildcard slot this year. This is not just on Nick Foles. He's not at his best, in fact far from it. But to be completely honest, no one on the offensive side of the ball is. Thanks for watching this week's episode. If you like the content, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, that's a wrap.